It is 10:15, and we welcome back to the program. His name is David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning, Manny. I'm doing great, sir.
Well, we've got a very interesting Show Me at the Lake to discuss here on this Thursday. A very complicated lawsuit out of Lake Area County here, out of Morgan County, involving the county treasurer who is filing or has filed a Backpay lawsuit against the county.
Right, she's suing herself, sort of, as a county official. It's an unusual case, and again, I have to clarify for everybody that I'm not a lawyer talking about it here, but I think it's a good example of a case of something that was wrong. I think we can all agree that it was wrong that she was making less than the other county officials at the same time. But I don't know if just being wrong is necessarily a cause for a successful lawsuit. It may well be. This is for a judge or jury to decide. But it certainly is interesting that she was paid for several years, almost a decade it sounds, less than the other officials in the area.
Yeah, it looks like she was started with the county in 2000, I believe took her position in 2003, 2002, somewhere in there, but essentially was making 74% of what other officials in the county were making. They were all at the 100% level.
Right, and that's not appropriate. But the strange thing is, at least in the beginning, she was on the Salary County Commission that voted for this as the Morgan County Treasurer, Luella Pryor. I mean, she's the one engaged in this lawsuit. And it's strange that she was on the Salary Commission that approved setting her own salary lower. Now, she has since, and from this Lake News Online story, said she probably shouldn't have done that, and it admitted she should have. She said she was talked out of it, her complaints at the time. But she did go along with it, and thankfully, several years later, this has been adjusted, and she is now properly making what all the other officials are making. But it's certainly interesting whether the taxpayers of Morgan County are going to be asked to come up with what is not a particularly large amount of money. I think we're talking somewhere between $40,000 to $90,000 in the various comments.
Yeah, it looks like it's the lawsuit is $93,600 that she's wanting in back pay from Morgan County. Now, the case started this week, and it's actually this is just me. I guess I find it interesting. They've got a retired judge out of Howard County that's actually going to be making this decision, and he said he's going to take all the arguments under advisement, and it's probably going to be a few weeks before he comes to a decision.
And that's probably fair. I mean, all the Morgan County judges are certainly going to be associated closely with all these other elected officials. So bringing in a judge from another county was certainly a wise move. And look, I think she certainly has a strong case for the most recent years of back pay that are under the statute of limitations. But going back farther than the statute of limitations, I think, for making claims like this is going to be difficult. But I think as I read this story, I think she certainly has a strong case for at least some of this back pay. And most importantly, though, I'm glad the situation has been corrected, because it was certainly not right that she was making less than the other county officials at the same time.
And it also mentions as well, at least in the background of this story, I believe it was brought up that there are other examples of where pay has been adjusted midterm for elected officials in counties throughout the state of Missouri.
Right. They do cite in the story a one where I believe it was a prosecutor who got a pay raise in the middle of the term. Perhaps it was a public administrator. But that was a case where the salary was set according to the judges in that county. So it was more of a salary schedule than a choice by the county commission to vote on salaries. So it was a slightly different matter. It's a very important law in our state that elected officials, with a couple of exceptions apparently, cannot vote themselves a pay raise without the voters having a chance in the intervening time to say yes or no to it, meaning by reelecting or unelecting that candidate. You can only give yourself a pay raise for a future term, and that's a very important distinction that does come into play in the case.
And the entire, I guess, where we're headed with this conversation now, as we continue to talk with David Stokes from the Show Me Institute in St. Louis on this edition of Show Me at the Lake, the whole idea or the background of this, you get into county officials and the fact that counties right now throughout the lake area and really throughout the state, we have just so many officials in county government, and that's where some of this also comes from, where some of these state statutes and laws have come up because there are just so many county officials out there.
There are. We have a lot of counties in the state of Missouri. I believe we have the fourth highest number of counties of the 50 states, and many of those counties have a dozen or more independently elected officials. It's very interesting, and it's important because there is evidence, there is economic evidence that the more elected officials you have, that correlates with greater spending in a county. And I did a paper several years ago called Government in Missouri, and your listeners can see it online at showmeinstitute.org, that talks about this in detail. And there's a lot of correlation there, and that's why it matters. The more elected officials you have, be it in a legislative body or be it separately elected officials such as a treasurer or prosecutor or coroner or clerk, the more you have, the more it often relates to greater spending. That's why it matters to me.
Would it be fair then to say, is it better for counties then in 2013 with the economy continued to struggle both on the state level and the national level to go with more appointed officials rather than elected?
I think it would be fair to say that. And in my paper and in some other writings I've done, I've tried to come up with some good guidelines for who should be elected and who should be appointed. And what, I think there's two general rules that if you're the office makes really important policy decisions, like the county commissioners or the county assessor or the prosecutor, then that office should be elected. Or if that office, they may not make real policy decisions, but if they serve as important checks on other elected officials, then they should probably be elected, such as a county auditor in Camden County or county treasurers or the county clerk again. Those positions should be elected. But if you have an office that really doesn't serve as a check and also doesn't really make any policy decisions, I think those are generally better off being appointed. And I think the most obvious example is the county coroner in Miller or Morgan County and many other Missouri counties. I don't think in 2013, where we're all familiar with CSI and all what the coroner might do thanks to television, I think a lot of people would agree that that position is probably better as an appointed medical professional and not an elected official.
Well, I do know some counties, and I've got to check myself here, but I do know of one county in the state and even some others now, they're relying on other medical services for that office of coroner because of budgetary cuts of one sort or another.
And that's an excellent choice. I mean, that gets them the win-win of having a professional medical service serve as a coroner and also saving them a little bit of money. So that's a great choice for counties, and I hope more counties do that. But other positions that are strictly legal but don't involve like prosecutions and the criminal element, things like public administrator and circuit clerk, I think those positions are also generally going to be better done as appointed. They don't really make the type of decisions that voters have a right and should demand being able to choose to reelect or unelect these people. And all the recorder of deeds is another. I mean, those are sort of the big four of the county positions that in most places in Missouri I think are better off being appointed.
When you look at the number of elected officials and the amount of money, and you mentioned referenced your paper that you wrote there, what is it that makes people spend more money if you have more elected officials? Is there one reason for that?
There is for the legislative body part. And we have small legislative bodies in Missouri counties. It's just generally the three-person county commission. But in cities, you have boards of aldermen that can sometimes get pretty large. And in a legislative body, the issue is log rolling. It's vote trading. It's if you support my project in my part of the city or the county or wherever, then I'll support your project that otherwise I wouldn't generally care about, but let's trade votes so we both win. And it's that type of trade-off that can, over time, lead to greater spending. For independently elected officials, and again, I do cite the papers that have been written on this subject, the cause is really more of it's hard for voters to appropriately follow and even voters who want to enforce fiscal discipline. If you have too many elected officials, it really becomes hard for the average voter to keep track and make good choices. You have the same problem if you have too few elected officials, that if you have just one elected person, the average voter can't possibly try and judge all the different things that one person is trying to do. So that can lead to greater spending too. And it's sort of a complicated log that is different for different places, but you do generally want to avoid having too many elected officials.
It would also seem, and you've also kind of alluded to this, that it would make sense for voters to have less, and this is going to sound strange, but to have less choices, because I've talked with voters in the past when they go to the ballot box in a county election and you've got, it's one of these election cycles where everybody's up for re-election. Many times, voters aren't always aware of who's running for what position.
Right, and that's how it can lead to greater spending, because that results over the long run in just an inability to maintain through your vote the fiscal discipline for so many offices, many of whom probably, because they don't make policy decisions or don't serve as important checks, shouldn't be elected in the first place. We'd all benefit if you had fewer choices in many Missouri counties and were able to really focus your work on the county commission and the county prosecuting attorney, the assessor, the treasurer, the county clerk, and the sheriff, the positions that I think should be elected because they should respond to voters every several years. That would make for, I think, better choices for everyone.
David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. As always, thank you so much for the time on this week's edition of Show Me at the Lake. Please give us the website address again if folks are interested in reading that study that you put together a few years ago.
Well, thank you, Manny, and Show Me Institute. We're always interested in questions of government structure, and these are important choices because, as you said, some counties are starting to slowly but surely reduce the number of elected officials in certain spots. And that's happening around the state, and I think it's a good move. And you can read this study and a lot of other writings on the subject at showmeinstitute.org, or you can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
David Stokes of the Show Me Institute, thank you again, sir, for the time. We will visit again next Thursday here on News Talk KRMS.
Thanks as always, Manny. Always enjoy being with your listeners, and I'll talk to you next week.